Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And as I rise to speak to the second reading of the Social Security Amendment Bill number 3, I wish to echo the sentiments from the Minister and pay my respects to Celia Lashley. Also, her contribution to this country will not be forgotten, and certainly as the mother of 2 teenage sons, I really appreciated the contribution that she made to our discussion in this country about our boys who are indeed gorgeous, and providing some level of comfort to parents who would sometimes, not me of course, Mr Speaker, but some parents who might look at their teenage boys and wonder what on earth is going on in their minds. And Celia certainly was a voice of wisdom that could help us all to deal with those sorts of circumstances. So, Mr Speaker, I do want to, though, spend a little time talking about the Social Security Amendment Bill number 3, which is what this debate is about. It's the second reading. It's a government bill, but it is supported by the Labor Party, as indeed we do in the majority of circumstances when there is good reason to do so in this House. And in supporting this bill, though, Mr Speaker, I will just say that our disappointment is that it's taken so long to reach the second reading. This bill has languished on the order paper for 4 years, at a time when the government has seen fit to bring all sorts of other measures forward that we didn't think were as important. Measures like, giving Sky City concessions on gambling laws so that problem gambling would become more of an issue in our community. Those sorts of things seem to be rushed through with indecent haste, and yet this bill, this simple bill that fixes loopholes that the government has known about for more than 4 years, is having its second reading after languishing behind some of those other draconian measures for 4 years. So we do support it. It does make sensible changes to remove some loopholes in the Social Security Act. As the Minister said, the bill will ensure that those receiving ACC payments from their employer are treated the same as those receiving ACC payments from ACC itself. And the Labor Party certainly supports that form of equal treatment. In fact, I think history will show that the idea that an employer, if they met certain criteria in terms of health and safety standards, could manage their own ACC system was in fact a Labor Party initiative. And I think it's important just to remember the background to that, because this was an incoming Labor government that was again fixing up the shambles that a national government had landed on this country when it completely privatised the ACC system and tried to do it overnight. Did it hugely unsuccessfully, against the will of the people, didn't listen, with the arrogance that people have come to see in this, and that's actually developing in this national government. That outgoing national government, in its dying months, decided to privatise the ACC system completely, without the backing of the New Zealand public. And my mother was actually working in the health system at the time, and I remember her in her role as a clerical worker for a general practitioner at the time, talking about the paperwork that had multiplied by about 10 times because of the privatisation of ACC. And so one of the responses from the incoming government, Mr Speaker, was in fact, I thought you might like that story about my mother, but was in fact actually that we did see that there was an opportunity for some employers, if they had a good track record with health and safety, and if they could prove that they could manage this well themselves, to do so. And at that time, it is this inequity that has come about, this loophole, I should say, that this bill aims to fix up. So we would call these employers, they're normally in a partnership agreement, they're called accredited employers, and so workers who are not necessarily going directly to ACC for their workplace accident but are going through a third-party insurer that has been contracted by their employer will be the people who may have had access to this loophole and won't any longer. But, well, I should say won't any longer, but in fact we're only up to the second reading, and goodness knows what other pieces of urgent legislation this government will find to put in front of this bill getting its third reading. Now, I hope it doesn't languish too much longer. Because the other issue, the other loophole that the government's known about for at least 4 years that this bill intends to close is a loophole that allows students to claim the Work and Income New Zealand accommodation supplement instead of the student allowance in instances where the accommodation supplement is in fact more generous than their student allowance. But, you know, I've got to stand up for students a little bit in this debate because they've had a really tough time from this government. They've had a terribly tough time from this government. Their student allowance rates have barely increased, while the price of rental accommodation has skyrocketed. And we know, we're all too familiar with what that's meant for students living in Canterbury and in Auckland, where they've suffered the greatest rental increases. But even in student towns, student cities like Hamilton, that has made the student life much more of a struggle than it needs to be. Those student allowance rates basically flatlining while rental accommodation and the cost of rental accommodation goes through the roof. Students have seen their course fees increase by up to 5% every year over that same period. And they've absorbed that increase of GST when the national government increased that to 15%, and still their student allowances have just flatlined. The student loans have been cut for part-time students. Student loan repayment rates have been increased by 20%. A new $40 annual student loan fee has been tacked on, and still the student allowance rates have flatlined. And so this loophole that has existed probably has been a bit of a godsend for some of these students, quite frankly. And I implore the government that as they close up this loophole, which we support them closing up because it is not the way it was intended to be, it's what we call in this House an unintended consequence, I implore them to recognise and understand the plight of students, of tertiary students, because it is very real, it is very pressing, and it is holding our country back. It is holding the future of this country back, that brighter future that the government once used to talk about. It used to be built into every single speech on the other side of the House, and we don't hear it any longer. But I really hope, now that I've raised that perhaps the next speaker that gets up on the government benches will actually outline what that brighter future is going to look like and how this bill is going to deliver it. Because the truth of this bill is it's a useful, small piece of legislation. It's not going to improve anyone's life. In fact, it will make some people's lives a bit tougher. The Labour Party is supporting it because these are loopholes that were not intentional, and we want to see equal treatment for people. So we'll support it on that basis. But look, nothing in here is for the beginning, you know, we're still pretty much at the beginning of the parliamentary year, nothing here is going to actually deliver that brighter future that they once promised. I would like to see the government coming forward with some more challenging and exciting bills that will actually deliver on that brighter future, but I certainly do hope that they don't bring any more detrimental bills in the way of this bill that, despite its simplicity, despite how straightforward it is, and despite the government knowing about these loopholes for 4 years, has taken 4 long years to get to just its second reading.
Mr. Speaker. Alfred Narrow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.